What's going on, my abnormal family? I've got a couple of police encounters here I wanted to share with you all this morning. It says, as a cop, I spend a lot of time dealing with things that scare people, things they can't or don't want to try and explain. I'm usually the person that gets the call to go out check on things that go bump in the night. Add in the fact I usually work alone in the middle of nowhere. I've ran across and seen something I can't explain. I can't rightly explain this. Was probably the first time in my career I had been in a supernatural situation. I had happened before in life, but cop wise, sorry. This was the starting point of what has turned out to be a very interesting career. One night, on the tail end of July, I was cruising back county roads trying to find some kind of trouble to get into. As the only deputy out in the county that night, I had been busy up to a point. Then the calls had slacked off around midnight. I hadn't seen a single soul for the last few hours, and I decided I would try to be proactive for a bit. The night was hot. I had the window rolled down. I had been driving for a few hours straight with no luck at finding anything. The only thing I had scared up, thing's trying to, the only thing he said he had scared up was a few rabbits and a fox. I decided to stop, stretch my legs, and answer nature's calling. I pulled to stop at a particularly empty part of the county. I had driven the road a few times. It was mostly old, abandoned farmhouses and barns. No one lived in the area, and it made a good target for thieves trying to steal copper or whatever that they could get their hands on. The left side of the road was nothing but cornfields as far as you could see. It was getting close to harvest time. The stalks were close to 7 or 8 feet tall and just a sea of green. On the right side of the truck was an old abandoned apple orchard. I never did get the full story of how the land came to be abandoned. It had something to do with the multiple mistresses, multiple wills, legitimate, illegitimate children, and other nonsense. The result of which was one of the 150 acres of fruit trees that had become its own little forest over the 20 or so years it had been unattended. I was sitting in the truck, head laid back, just enjoying my little break. I had closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, I looked into the cornfield and made a direct eye contact with something. At first, I thought it was a person, and it almost gave me a heart attack right there. The thing stood about 7 foot tall. Its eyes were human, but they shone in the night light like animal eyes. I'm not a weak man. I've done more stupid and foolish things in my time than I care to remember. I've been afraid before, and I'm not above admitting it. There was something about those eyes that absolutely terrified me, though. So I did what any normal, insane 22-year-old dumb kid would do, and I chased it. I kept eye contact with the thing. It slowly rolled up my window, and without breaking, I checked out with dispatch over the radio, grabbed my patrol rifle off its mount above me. I remember taking a deep breath and with throwing the door open and jumping out of the truck yelling, "Sheriff's office," the most authoritative voice I could muster. I maintained eye contact with the entire time, except right where my vision crossed the pillar of one driver's side. As soon as my boots touched the dirt on the road, the creature was gone. I caught nothing but a blur, as black and brown-shaped vultures crossed the road and ran into the trees. Once again, I let my sense of self-security get the better of me. I kicked the door closed on the truck and took off after it, yelling for it to stop. I stumbled into the forest, and it was hit with the most overpowering odor. It was a combination of unwashed person body odor and animal musk. I still remember the smell vividly. Years later, I've been around rotting bodies that didn't impact me as much as the smell of that creature. I've never been a particularly fast runner. I've not ever cared much for it, and I've always been more of a short burst kind of guy. Whatever I was going after was fast, though. It didn't dawn on me until much later that it was probably just playing with me, leading me further into its miniature forest. I would catch a black blur moving off in the distance. I heard a branch break or a sound off to the side. I stumbled around like this for a good 15 minutes before my bravado and adrenaline wore off, and I decided I should head back to the truck because I was alone and scared at this point. The whole way back, I had that itch between my shoulder blades, like I was being watched. I'm sure he was. It was probably circling around on him where there was more than one. He was probably in a real bad situation, fixing to get even worse. Like I was an intruder in someone else's domain. I made it out of the trees and back to the truck. It was in the same place I had left it, but the driver's side door was open, the dome light on, the vehicle turned off with the key still in the ignition. I knew I hadn't locked the door, but I know that it had left running. I didn't often turn it off during my shift. I checked the truck, making sure it was empty. The same smell filled the cab of the truck. It was in the seats and the carpets, like something had sat in my seat and just wallowed around in it. I started the truck and got out of there as fast as I could. Sounds to me like it doubled back on him and got inside of his vehicle. Might have thought about waiting on him in the vehicle. I didn't tell anyone about the encounter. I just told dispatch I had thought I'd seen something that turned out to be nothing and left it at that. Around a year later, during one of my few times I rotated 2 days and had a partner to work with, I was driving around on the opposite side of the county. I had just cleared a cattle call playing cowboy, pushing some steers back into the fence when my partner called me wanting to know where I was. He was scared and I could hear it in his voice. I let him know where I was and he asked if I could meet him down at the southwest part of the county. There was an old gin down there. I just happened to be in the same general area of my encounter about a year prior. I had never told him about it and I agreed to meet him. The story I got from him was he had pulled into the same cornfield from a year earlier, not too far from where my story took place. He had backed down into it to turn road that was used to maintain the pivot. He decided to stop there to get a few minutes of rest. It was Sunday morning. Like most of our Sundays, nothing really would happen until lunch, and then people started to get active. My partner had dozed off for a few minutes and then been woke by the truck violently being shook back and forth. With a dust cloud of dissipating around him, he first thought I must have been messing with him. When he got out to check, he told me he smelled a nasty animal odor. Not finding anything else out of the ordinary, he went to get back in the truck and drove away. He drove down to the gym, got out, and walked around the place to make sure that no one was there. When he went to get back into the truck, he noticed a handprint on the top of his window. Now, anyone who has ever driven down a dirt road will tell you that handprints on vehicles with dust and stand out. He saw the print, freaked out, and called me. Right over his head on the top part of the door of the cab of the truck was the biggest handprint I've ever seen in my life. I have average hands for my size. This print was so large, it freaked me out. It was easily bigger than 2 of my hands. I told him the story. He described the smell nearly the same as I did. Neither of us found out what was living down there. I heard a few more stories over my time there. I even ran across a guy who was convinced it was the West Texas version of Bigfoot. I would answer a few suspicious person calls around the area over the next few years. I always kept an eye out, but never had another encounter like I did that night. It seems like once they're in the area, people do have a lot of encounters, like my grannies and stuff. It seems like when they find an area they like, they stay in that area. I'd say they're pretty lucky that nothing happened to them, and I sure don't advise going to a dark, remote place, pulling off and going to sleep, even if you're in a vehicle. It could have knocked that side glass out and had him out of that vehicle before he'd have knew it. I would say they were probably just trying to warn him to get him out of the area. Pretty lucky men. Don't go chasing something off into really tall grass. Not a smart idea. They get you in there, they'll ambush you. And the next day, you're killed by a mountain lion, a panther or something. But, even our law enforcement officers are having run-ins with these things, and I'll guarantee you this was probably changed to another narrative. But it's just one I wanted to share with you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Till the next one, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner, and we'll see you soon.